2019 was supposed to be the biggest year in Dragon Ball's history. Heading into the new year, we were coming off of record high revenue numbers for the Dragon Ball franchise. We were coming off the much hyped series finale of Dragon Ball Super, an event that, despite disapproval from both Toei and the government of Japan, managed to bring thousands together to watch on giant screens. We were coming off an all-new movie, a movie beloved by fans the world over, a movie that made a ton of money at the box office, but most importantly, a movie that delivered a massively refreshed look for the entire franchise going forward. Tadayoshi Yamamuro's 25-year run as Dragon Ball's chief animation supervisor and character designer had finally come to an end, and the newly appointed Naohiro Shintani would provide much-needed redesigns for all of our favorite characters. Yamamuro's stiff, tight, shiny look was out, and Shintani's loose, natural, animation-friendly look was in. Most agreed after seeing Dragon Ball Super Broly in theaters that it was the best Dragon Ball had ever looked in animated form, and Shintani's new designs had a lot to do with that. With the renewed Toriyama-approved character designs, it was clearly time to usher in a new era of Dragon Ball. And surely Toei would do just that. All the pieces were in place. Dragon Ball is their biggest moneymaker, and it was only logical that we'd quickly see a successor to Dragon Ball Super to continue the momentum from the Broly movie. A weekly, episodic TV show featuring the wonderful new Shintani designs and incredibly fast-paced and stylized action scenes directed by Tatsuya Nagamine. Right? Well, here we are in February 2020, and it's pretty clear by now that things didn't go exactly as we had hoped. Despite such a monumental run for the franchise, and seemingly all the pieces in place for a big new successor, there was no follow-up to DBS Broly. There was no new Dragon Ball Super anime. Instead of having its biggest year ever, 2019 ended up being one of the most dull, disappointing, and nothing happening years in modern Dragon Ball history. But there's more to the story than that. A lot more. Tooper's complete absence in 2019 dominated discussion throughout the year and turned the Dragon Ball fandom upside down. As it turns out, there was a crazy, ongoing story throughout the entire year that somehow ended in the most disappointing way imaginable for Dragon Ball fans. Actually, that's a lie, because I think the ending was something even the most pessimistic fans couldn't even imagine. So today we'll explore the behind-the-scenes story of Dragon Ball Super's return, or lack thereof, in 2019. We'll explore the story of how exactly a multi-billion-dollar franchise like Dragon Ball, at the peak of its popularity, could go dark for an entire year. It's a story of drama, a story of constant disappointment, and the story of a fanbase nearly tearing itself apart over rumors, speculation, leaks, insiders, and trusted sources. This story is fascinating. As I look back and put all the pieces together, it is truly one of the strangest tales I've ever witnessed in the fandom's history, and I've been around it for close to 25 years now. So we'll recap all the madness as it took place through 2019, and in the end, we'll look at the Dragon Ball franchise as it stands right now, here in February 2020. Perhaps then, and only then, can we attempt to answer the difficult questions. What caused an entire year to vanish without a trace of new mainline Dragon Ball content? When could Dragon Ball Super make its return to weekly television? Hell, what's next for Dragon Ball in general? Is it a weekly anime, or should we expect a new movie first? And is there any reason to believe that 2020 is the year that we'd hear about it, or will the powers that be remain silent once again? Let's not waste any more time and get right into it. To truly understand the absolute stranglehold Tooper had on the Dragon Ball fandom throughout all of 2019, and why our current situation here in 2020 is so frustrating, we have to go all the way back to the beginning in December of 2018. As I touched on earlier, enthusiasm for Dragon Ball was legitimately at an all-time high, and we only need to look at the financial releases from Toei and Bandai Namco to see that. Super's debut in 2015 and the franchise returning to weekly episodic releases for the first time in 18 years resulted in sky-high sales, an exponential jump compared to those earlier, darker years. Considering its popularity, Dragon Ball Super came to a somewhat abrupt end in March of 2018, but fans still had something to look forward to. A new movie, which was first revealed at the Jump Festa event in December of 2017, was slated for a December 2018 theatrical release. That, at the time untitled movie, was revealed to be Dragon Ball Super Broly, and Toei continued to roll out small teases of the film throughout 2018, culminating in a massive blowout and the hype-inducing trailer release at San Diego Comic-Con that summer. Despite Super coming to an end, there was a lot to be excited about here. The trailer looked amazing, and we got our first good look at Naohiro Shintani's new character designs for Goku, Vegeta, and Broly. Even though this was just one movie, the implications this new art style had on the entire franchise as a whole were huge. DBS Broly finally saw a theatrical release in Japan on December 14th, and rolled into theaters worldwide in a limited capacity during the weeks that followed. It was met with commercial and critical success. While some were a bit dismissive of the movie's actual plot, most agreed that the art and animation itself was top-notch, and the best Dragon Ball had ever looked. The new Shintani era of Dragon Ball had officially begun. The fandom rejoiced, and the future was bright. Just days after Broly's theatrical release in Japan was Jump Festa. It had pretty much become tradition at that point to expect big Dragon Ball related news from the event. We were getting substantial Dragon Ball announcements out of Jump Festa for years now. This year, Super was even getting its own panel, so the stars were aligning here for something big. Again, it was while Super's Tournament of Power arc was still airing in Japan that we got confirmation of the 20th Dragon Ball movie and its December 2018 release, and that announcement came at Jump Festa. So it only made sense that we get our first look at what was next for Dragon Ball after the Broly movie at this event. The powers that be wouldn't just keep us in the dark, right? Hype was high surrounding the event, to say the least. These somewhat lofty expectations heading into Jump Festa 2019 didn't just appear out of thin air. This is where our good friends, the insiders, enter the picture. So before we continue, I need to quickly make a few things clear. This video is not in any way meant to be a hit piece on any of the well-known Dragon Ball insiders. Having followed the story from beginning to end in real time, I strongly believe that nothing said publicly by any of the insiders I'll be mentioning in this video were said with any kind of malicious intent to mislead the public. All of them have a strong track record of providing credible insider information in the past and have shared accurate Dragon Ball related scoops before official announcements were made numerous times. If you're a YouTuber, killing your credibility by making up a bunch of fake leaks makes no sense at all, as any short-term gains in viewership or popularity would be erased entirely by long-term damage to your brand. All of these insiders are respected YouTubers with a strong following and obviously know better than that. Having seen the evidence myself, I'm certain none of the insiders were lying or making any of this information up, and at worst, there was a misunderstanding somewhere along the way. AJ in particular has been incredibly transparent through this entire ordeal in his videos, on Twitter, and on the Kanzenshuu forum. So I hope no offense is taken as I bring up these potentially sensitive topics and stories once again, as it is certainly not intended. This video is a simple recollection of the events as they occurred, and a recollection of the fan base's reaction to said events, all from my point of view. Anyways, where were we? Like any other fandom, a number of well-respected insiders exist within the Dragon Ball community. These insiders have managed to create connections with people who actually work on Dragon Ball in some capacity, and in the past, they have correctly leaked certain tidbits of information before said information was revealed through official means. Come December 2018, these insiders claimed they were nearly certain that we would be hearing about the return of Dragon Ball Super at the Jump Festa 2019 event, based on the information they had heard. AJ is a fantastic Dragon Ball YouTuber and has been a prominent member of the Dragon Ball community for many, many years. As part of his exhaustive animation breakdown videos for Dragon Ball Super, he's managed to come in direct contact with a number of artists and animators who have worked on the show. Indeed, AJ has been open about how he gets some of these so-called scoops. He simply looks up the names of these animators on Twitter and asks them questions. Sometimes they answer him and will even send through images of materials used for the show, which is a really cool peek behind the scenes. But yeah, there's really not much shady business going on here. It's really just simple journalism. As such, AJ has always been a reliable source, so when he said he was pretty much 100% sure Super's return would be announced at Jump Festa, then damn it, Super's return was probably going to be announced at Jump Festa. Here's the thing. Not only did we expect a huge announcement at Jump Festa in December 2018, but many also believed we'd see Super return to air, specifically in April of 2019. For a number of different reasons, the community just pretty much came to the conclusion that April sounded about right for a return. It would be just over a year since the final episode of Super aired on March 25th, 2018. Certain production timelines and staffing moves over at Toei also suggested an April return for Super was in the cards. And finally, we had hope. Endless hope. Come April, a solid chunk of time would have passed since Dragon Ball Super Broly's theatrical release. So to keep the momentum going, an April 2019 return for Super just made sense. Things making sense. Oh, Dragon Ball fandom circa December 2018, you have so much to learn. This was the first real big expectation from the fanbase as a whole that I could remember for Tooper. A December announcement at Jump Festa, leading to a return to weekly television in April 2019. Well, Jump Festa came, and the much anticipated return of Dragon Ball Super was not announced. What we got instead was an incredibly vague and casually sexist comment from Akira Toriyama. He confirmed that he was, quote, working on the next work. Whether that meant the return of Super, a new movie, or another chapter of Nekomajin, that was up to you to decide because they didn't tell us anything. Instead, more focus was placed on the new Galactic Patrol Prisoner arc for the Dragon Ball Super manga by Toyotaro, and the new Universal Conflict arc of the Super Dragon Ball Heroes promotional anime. And while those are neat announcements, the manga and Heroes always felt like supplemental material to the real thing. And coming out of Jump Festa 2019, we had no substantial update on what the next real thing was or when it was coming. The Dragon Ball fanbase, being as rabid and passionate as it is, wasn't just going to take no for an answer. If we weren't going to get a concrete announcement about Super's return at Jump Festa, then we'd get it somewhere else. And soon. Again, the idea that Toei would just leave us completely in the dark for an extended period of time following Broly's release was out of the question. So we immediately look forward to January 2019. Why January? Well, the truth is, Jump Festa was only a couple of days after the release of DBS Broly in theaters, and the movie hadn't even released in theaters worldwide yet. Maybe the community was getting a bit ahead of itself, expecting such a massive announcement so close to the film's opening. Perhaps the giant news was being held off for a few weeks, as not to confuse the marketing for the DBS Broly movie. Also, it was around this time last January that Super's replacement was announced, and that replacement started airing, you guessed it, in April. This is where Kitaro enters the story. Gegege no Kitaro has been around for even longer than Dragon Ball. The original manga began in 1960 and has been adapted into anime form not once, not twice, but 7 times from 1968 all the way to 2018. The 7th adaptation of Gegege no Kitaro celebrated the franchise's 50th anniversary and began airing on April 1st, 2018, which is an interesting date because it's exactly 1 week after the final episode of Dragon Ball Super aired. Indeed, it was this new Kitaro anime that took Dragon Ball Super's 9 a.m. Sunday morning slot on Fuji TV over in Japan. And this big news was announced back on January 18th, 2018, confirming that Super would be ending on March 25th, and Kitaro would begin on April 1st. So, for better or for worse, this new Kitaro anime and Dragon Ball Super have been kind of linked together in some strange way. There was a strong belief that if Kotaro came to an end, then surely Super would be back to reclaim its 9 a.m. Sunday morning slot before One Piece. And if Kotaro was coming to an end in late March, early April, we'd probably hear about it and learn of its successor in January. The most smoke to this fire came out of a flyer from Toei's booth at the Anime Japan event, way back in March of 2018. The flyer claimed that the new upcoming Kotaro anime would run for, quote, 50 plus episodes. No further specifics were given, but for a weekly series, 50 plus episodes probably meant we were going to see a run that lasted for about a year. And so the Dragon Ball fanbase collectively assumed that maybe Kotaro would be wrapping up its run in April of 2019, which would allow Super to return roughly 1 year after it ended. Seems pretty simple, right? However, there seemed to be a bit of a misunderstanding. Or maybe just wishful thinking. Yeah, probably just wishful thinking. Fuji TV's scheduling is based on cours, which is a somewhat confusing concept that basically measures the length of an anime series. Briefly, each year is split into 4 different seasons consisting of 3 months, and 1 cour of anime will run for one of those seasons. Of course, an anime could run for more than 1 cour, but no matter how long it goes, generally there's a cutoff point at the end of each season. If an anime comes to an end, it'll most likely happen in one of these months, and a new show will start in one of these. As you can see, April is the start of a new season according to this calendar, and that's partly why so many expected Super to return in April specifically. Obviously, we saw this cour scheduling in full effect back in 2018. Dragon Ball Super ran until the end of the winter cour at the end of March, and Kotaro picked up the very first week of April as the spring cour began. So if Super was going to come back in April and assume the same time slot as Kotaro, it was almost certainly going to happen on April 7th, unless a rare exception was made and Super returned mid-cour. Now, there's only one problem here. We know Kitaro's run is at least 50 episodes. Believe it or not, episode 50 would fall on exactly April 7th, 2019. So if the pamphlet is to be believed and Kotaro was running for 50 plus episodes, that would mean it would at least continue airing a couple of weeks past that key April 7th date. Suddenly, Super returning in April 2019 became a real long shot. The core scheduling system would have to be broken for all the math to make sense. And so, many started to give up on the April dream, and the new Day of Destiny became July 7th, 2019, which would kick off the summer cour. However, hope remained that Super would still return in April. Perhaps an exception to the regular rules could be made for Dragon Ball, considering it is a multi-billion-dollar franchise after all. Some speculated the show would pop up in a new time slot, and Kotaro would continue to run alongside it. Being able to start the new Dragon Ball anime in April and capitalize off the crazy momentum from the Broly movie would be beneficial to all. However, the clock was ticking. That announcement had to come, and it had to come now. The original Super was announced in a rather low-key way via random press release just 2 months before the first episode aired. It wasn't some flashy event like a Jump Festa or Comic-Con, it kinda just came out of the blue. So, for an increasingly desperate fanbase, there was always a chance that, out of nowhere, the random announcement of Super could just happen. And then, out of nowhere, the random announcement of Super just happened. Whoa. Amazingly, the community only caught wind of this mind-blowing news days after the event actually happened. Toei had confirmed the existence of new Dragon Ball Super episodes through this spotlight release as a part of the NatP annual market and conference in Miami, Florida. NatP is a well-known and long-running conference that exists primarily for content producers to sell their new and upcoming content to broadcasters that are looking to acquire programming. In other words, it would make a ton of sense on Toei's part to have Super ready to sell to potential licensees at an event like this one. A NatP 2019 TV listings document was also dug up. Published on January 13th, 2019, the Dragon Ball Super section claimed to have 67 episodes, each with a 30-minute runtime, and with more in production. Now, if this was somehow a reference to the Super we had all already watched, of course, all 131 episodes had aired in Japan by January 2019, and episode 93 had just aired on Toonami in America on January 12th. So logically, most read this 67 episode figure as the next quote-unquote season of Super, with more episodes in production. It was time to get hyped. Super was on the way, and the April dream was still alive with this news. Would the new anime use Naohiro Shintani's new character designs as seen in DBS Broly? Would Tetsuya Nagamine be involved as the director? Would Toyotaro's manga-exclusive Galactic Patrol Prisoner arc be adapted into anime form and officially become part of the canon storyline? Would we get a Broly movie recap arc like we did with Battle of Gods and Resurrection F to start off Dragon Ball Super? The speculation ramped up, the hype was high, and we were gonna get answers to all these questions soon enough. Of course, just days after this news broke and set the fanbase on fire, Toei came out and denied mentioning or announcing more episodes of Super, and that they don't plan on producing new episodes at this time. But come on. Things leak before their originally intended announcement all the time, and we always see a company deny until they can officially roll out their meticulous marketing plan. This is nothing new and happens all the time. Plus, this January announcement lined up perfectly with everything the insiders were saying. They knew Super was in production, and that the lack of an announcement at Jump Festa was puzzling because it was being worked on as we speak. So the announcement coming soon after, here in January, was no surprise. Many also received word from those at the NatP event in person that yes, Toei did confirm all of this at the event. It all just made way too much sense, and we would probably get the official public announcement in just a few days, with an April return of Super surely to follow. Or not. Days went by, days became weeks, and just like that, a month had passed, and we were in March of 2019 with no further update regarding Dragon Ball Super's return from Toei. At this point, it was clear that an April return of Super was basically impossible. The fandom received the final nail in the April coffin on March 7th, when the official Kotaro website confirmed that Kotaro would be renewed for a second season beginning on April 7th. That was supposed to be Super's spot. It was a tough pill to swallow, to say the least. Kotaro being renewed meant, in all likelihood, it will be receiving another 50+ episodes. For Dragon Ball Super, this meant one of three things. Number one, Super could just get another time slot on Fuji TV, or Kotaro could move back half an hour, allowing Super to assume its original 9 AM time slot. This was the scenario most believed in, and it would allow for a much speculated July return for Dragon Ball Super. Number two, Kotaro could be renewed for only 2 cours. This would result in roughly 26 new episodes for the season, and Kotaro coming to an end in late September, allowing Super to make its grand return to Fuji TV in October 2019, or the beginning of the fall season. Scenario number 3 wasn't even worth considering. The theoretical idea that Kotaro Season 2 could run for an entire year until April 2020, and Super would have to wait until then before it could make its return. I mean, there was just no way Toei would go the entire year of 2019 without bringing back Dragon Ball Super. I mean, that's just preposterous, so we didn't even consider it. We were back on the hype train, kids. The official Super announcement was going to happen really soon, and at the very latest, it would be airing in October of 2019. Hopefully sooner if Kotaro could just move out of the damn way. No offense, Kotaro, but you're killing me here. In early March, AJ came out on the Kanzenshuu forum and was able to clear up some of the prior confusion regarding Super's return and the supposed April 2019 air date. He was given some secondhand information from a foreign licensor and incorrectly assumed based on that information that Super would be returning in April. Obviously, that didn't turn out to be the case. AJ regretted making that information public and freely admitted that it hurt his credibility. All that said, he still had concrete confirmation that Super's follow-up series was in production. However, going forward, he would only come out with a specific return date if he verified the information firsthand and confirmed it with multiple sources. If that day ever came, it would truly begin the next big chapter of this Dragon Ball Super story. Well, just days later, we began the next big chapter of the Dragon Ball Super story. Just days after AJ cryptically tweeted, "Tooper is saved," a number of Dragon Ball insiders decided to drop some absolute bombshells regarding the return of Dragon Ball Super. The March 17th Megaton. This was it. The big one. DBTuber extraordinaire Geekdom 101 put together a video going into great detail on everything he had been told about Super's return. This news was huge and spread like wildfire all across the internet and onto various news sites. Geekdom claimed the show would be back in July 2019, and the new Now Hero Shintani character designs would in fact be used. On top of that, he was able to confirm this information with multiple sources. The next batch of Super episodes were supposedly in production since at least October of 2018, which is why there were so many rumors floating around that an announcement would come at Jump Festa in December. This much longer production schedule was put in place to allow animators all the time they needed to put out a polished product, and basically prevent another Episode 5 debacle from ever happening again. As of March 2019, Geekdom claimed that the storyboarding phase was complete, and animators were working on the animation phase itself, which suggested an air date coming very soon. A July start would mean an incredible 4 months of production time for each episode, compared to the god-awful 3 to 5 week production time for the original episodes of Super. It was this poor production schedule that plagued the series and resulted in low-quality animation problems throughout the show's entire run. As for the whole Kotaro situation, Geekdom didn't have a concrete answer here. But based on what he heard, he believed Kotaro would be moved so that Super could have its original 9 AM time slot back. Over on the Kanzenshu forum, AJ elaborated on the news and backed up Geekdom's claims. He confirmed that the information came directly from staff within Toei, and both the July return date and Now Hero Shintani's character designs being used were mentioned by multiple different animators. Days later, AJ would specifically state that he had over 10 different confirmations. Yonko Productions also chipped in, confirming the same information. Again, I want to stress that all 3 of these insiders have been trustworthy sources for Dragon Ball related leaks or scoops or whatever you want to call them. They have legit connections with people in the know, and all 3 were coming out at the same time, confirming this information. As someone who followed this entire story from the beginning, I could assure you that this felt like the big one. Super was going to be back, and it was going to be back in July. Days later, after this news story completely blew up, Toei denied the rumors once again, and claimed that new episodes of Super are not being produced at this time. But come on. Things leak before their originally intended announcement all the- Wait a minute. Haven't we gone over this before? As of March 2019, in the eyes of the community at least, it was happening. The wait was long, but Tooper was finally upon us. With a better production schedule and all the Shintani designs, it sounded like everything we had hoped for. So now, all we needed was a public announcement confirming all this information from Toei themselves. Unfortunately, no one knew when the announcement would come specifically, including the insiders. However, in his video, Geekdom speculated that the end of April or early May would make the most sense for a public announcement. April 26th marked the 30th anniversary of Dragon Ball Z, and May 9th is Goku Day in Japan. So the expectation was set that an announcement would probably come on either of those 2 days, or of course sometime in between. It's also important to note that Bandai would be releasing their financial results for the prior fiscal year on May 9th, and Toei will be doing the same on May 14th. This release would also include forecasts for the next fiscal year. So it would only make sense that Bandai and Toei would tell their shareholders that Super would be returning during this upcoming fiscal year, with the forecasts to reflect that. They could brag about all the excitement they've generated on social media. Just an announcement of a series the size of Dragon Ball making a return would be big business and instill a ton of confidence in shareholders. Everything was lining up perfectly, and it really felt like the moment of truth was approaching. So, April 26th came, and there was no announcement. Okay, that's fine. Endgame. The goddamn Avengers opened on April 26th, and the world basically stopped to take it in. They didn't want to get eaten up by all the Endgame hype. That makes sense. It only went on to become the biggest movie ever at the box office. It's cool though, it's cool. We still got Goku Day to look forward to. That's the day. It'll happen. Hype got even crazier when this visual was released as a part of a stream on the Dragon Ball Heroes website. It was a tease for something big coming on May 9th. But far more importantly, it was this art of Super Saiyan Blue Goku in the Shintani style that was a part of this teaser image. Heroes used the older Yamamuro style. The fanbase agreed, surely this was going to be the announcement we were waiting for. If it was anything other than Super's return, they'd be using the Yamamuro character designs. This was it. It had to happen now. How could 10 plus sources from within Toei be wrong? But then, the day came. May 9th was here, and it was no Goku Day. It was no Goku Day at all, because there was no Tupper announcement, and the silence was deafening. One thing was for sure, the insiders that we had trusted all this time were going to have to provide some kind of explanation here, because now, nothing makes sense. The situation regarding Super's return was an unusual one ever since it no-showed Jump Festa 2019. But with the silence on Goku Day, it became abundantly clear that something strange was going on behind the scenes at Toei. Come May 2019, there was just too much smoke to this fire for nothing to come out in an official capacity. We had 15 verified Toei animators confirming that Super was being worked on. Besides, even if we disregarded all of the insiders' claims, at the end of the day, there's only one thing that's truly real, and that's the bottom line: the money. On the very same day the big announcement was supposed to go down, May 9th, Bandai released their financial results for fiscal year 2019. As expected, fiscal 2019 was Dragon Ball's biggest year ever for the company, and destroyed their initial forecasts by a whopping 49 billion yen. In American dollar figures, Dragon Ball generated a gargantuan $1.174 billion from April 1st, 2018 to March 31st, 2019, absolutely blowing away all of the other Bandai Namco franchises. Toei released their financial results for the same time period as well, and lo and behold, Dragon Ball made them over $193 million. In the last quarter alone, Dragon Ball generated $43 million for Toei, more than 40% of their total revenue. Nothing else in their library comes close, and the funny thing is, this is no surprise to anyone at this point. Dragon Ball has been on fire since Super's return, and things really started going crazy in 2016 with the start of the Future Trunks arc. And so, back in March of 2018, Toei themselves established an entire department dedicated specifically to Dragon Ball. To get an idea of how huge that move is, Toei only has 3 divisions in total. One division is focused on television anime, the second is focused on CG anime, and the third is just entirely dedicated to Dragon Ball. It is their biggest moneymaker by such a gigantic margin that a move like this is 100% justified. And yet, with the Dragon Ball franchise bringing all that money in thanks to Super's popularity and the Broly movie, there was no successor announced for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2020. It was completely baffling, to say the least. So what was the holdup? Really, all the community could do at this point was speculate, because as I outlined, real-life logic is thrown out the window when a franchise is generating as much money as Dragon Ball is, and yet no update is provided. Maybe Toei was waiting for Super's dub to wrap up in America and other parts of the world before revealing the successor. Or perhaps they are just allowing a really long production timeline for each episode. Toei was obviously traumatized by the response to episode 5 and never wants something like that to happen again to their most valuable brand. If this was true, and production was already ongoing behind the scenes as per our insiders, it would be a longer production schedule than anyone could have ever imagined. And that's a good thing. A very long production timeline is not entirely unprecedented for huge, long-running anime. Pokemon, for a time, had some animators start work for a new episode a whopping 9 months before it actually aired. For reference, Dragon Ball Super's episodes were produced in 3 to 5 weeks, which is why, on occasion, we'd end up with something like this. I don't think anyone wanted to see that kind of stuff pop up again for Tooper, and we just saw with DBS Broly what these unbelievably talented animators were capable of with more time to work on their craft. So the idea of a better production schedule for Dragon Ball Super was like music to my ears. Now, to be clear, animators didn't work on a single episode of Pokemon for that entire 9-month span. An episode would be worked on and completed in about 2 months' time, and then at that point, it would sit in a buffer of completed episodes until it was time to air. Assuming the July 2019 start for Tooper was out the window, it was back to the Coors we went. As speculated earlier in the video, the next logical starting point would be October 2019, and thus, a ridiculously generous production schedule for each episode, like Pokemon's, was in the cards. Hey, if any anime out there deserves the Pokemon treatment, it's Dragon Ball. It's a billion-dollar franchise and it should look like it. But maybe everything wasn't so rosy. Maybe there was something else going on behind the scenes that was causing a delay of some sort. No matter what the truth was, the question still remained. How could so many people seemingly in the know, with so many verified sources, get this so wrong? AJ expressed his confusion on May 9th when it was clear that no announcement was happening. He reiterated that he was definitely told July was the return date for Super, and that Shintani's character designs would be used. This was coming from 15 different people at Toei who all shared with him the same information. And Toei themselves told licensors to expect an announcement in April. Nothing came of any of it, and AJ was at a loss. Just for good measure, AJ even shared some Genga he received from one of the animators that did work on DBS Broly. I'll say it again, AJ wasn't making this stuff up. He is obviously connected to people in the know, but for some unknown reason, the public announcement of Super's return just never ended up happening. In early June, Geekdom revealed his timeline of events in a video, which pretty much lined up with AJ's. Geekdom explained that the original rumors from late 2018, pre-Jump Festa, stemmed from the Polish dubbing house and other international dubbing houses for Dragon Ball Super. Apparently, it was around this time that they received word directly from Toei Animation that Dragon Ball Super would be returning soon, and even received materials from Toei in order to be prepared for the big marketing push once it began. Obviously, this word got out to the insiders, and that's the source of all those rumblings from before Jump Festa in December of 2018. After the theatrical release of DBS Broly, Geekdom and AJ both confirmed with 3 different sources that Super would be returning sometime in 2019 with no specific date given. They figured the announcement would come at Jump Festa, but obviously that didn't end up being the case. Then in December, the Italian voice actor for Vegeta publicly stated that he had received materials for Tooper, and that this would be a new story taking place after DBS Broly. This news did make the rounds, and the voice actor quickly rescinded his comment. Of course, most assumed he just spoke out of hand and didn't realize he wasn't allowed to talk about this new unannounced series yet. We mostly figured it was just more smoke to the fire and the announcement of a new Super series was imminent. Geekdom then touched on the Natpi story that I went over earlier, and again, this was just more smoke to the fire. It was in February 2019 that various insiders were able to communicate directly with members of the Dragon Ball Super staff at Toei. Eyebrows were already raised when a big portion of the Super production staff were suddenly not assigned to any other projects for months, and the assumption was that they were working in secret on the new Dragon Ball Super. It was in late February Geekdom received word from 5 different sources that Tooper was in the pre-animation phase, and would be coming back in July of 2019, with Naohiro Shintani's character designs. With so many sources all confirming that same information, Geekdom decided it was time to share this with the public, and that's when he dropped his video in March with all that big news. Geekdom even shared screen caps of the conversations had with the Super team, confirming all this information. Geekdom also went on to explain the whole late April, early May announcement that obviously never came to pass. The origin of that entire story came from an Italian event called the Bologna Licensing Trade Fair. On April 1st, a meeting that focused specifically on Dragon Ball Super was scheduled. This meeting took place, and soon after, Geekdom received word from Italian licensors that Super's return would be announced publicly in late April or early May, and that's why he speculated in his video that an announcement would likely come between April 26th and May 9th. But of course, as we know, that never ended up happening. So, with Goku Day behind us, Geekdom followed up with the Super staff for some kind of update or clarification. Amazingly enough, he was told once again by these Toei employees that Super was coming back in July. What? Indeed, it seemed that even as late as May 2019, staff at Toei were under the assumption that Super would be back in July of 2019. What is going on here? Well, Geekdom did have an explanation, or he at least came to a fairly logical conclusion. As of June 2019, the belief was that Tooper was still in production, but its initial July broadcast date, the date staff at Toei were told about directly, had been quietly postponed behind the scenes. Of course, the question was why? Why would one of the hottest anime properties in the world, and one that had been in production for months and months already, be delayed at the last minute like this? While the fanbase could only speculate, our detective work continued to bring us back to one place. And that one place is One Piece. 2019 marked the 20th anniversary of the One Piece anime, and it was clear that Toei was putting a tremendous amount of focus on the franchise throughout the entire year. On June 1st, the first clip showing off a new, completely refreshed look for the One Piece anime was revealed to the world. This visual overhaul would coincide with the beginning of the Wano arc on, you guessed it, July 7th. The look of the show was massively overhauled with new character designs, a new art style and filter, and oh my god, Nagamine is the director. With Tetsuya Nagamine now attached as director, and a new look that was very clearly more natural and animator friendly, comparisons immediately sprung up between the new One Piece and Dragon Ball Super Broly. The One Piece anime was receiving its much needed refresh, but Dragon Ball's was seemingly nowhere to be found. However, the most work over at Toei seemed to be going into the upcoming One Piece Stampede movie, which would be receiving an August theatrical release in Japan. Between the refreshed anime and the Stampede movie, Toei was pumping a tremendous amount of resources into One Piece. And when I say resources, I don't just mean a huge budget for marketing, but more so staff. Indeed, nearly every major animator we've grown to love from their work on Dragon Ball Super and the Broly movie had moved on to work on One Piece Stampede. Yuya Takahashi, Ryo Onishi, Naoki Tate, the list goes on and on. These were all the big names, and they were all on One Piece now. And so it became very easy to believe that Super's return was delayed so that Toei staff could focus on One Piece, and Toei's promotional muscle could focus completely on One Piece without a gigantic new Dragon Ball anime taking away all of its thunder. Just to be clear, no one outright confirmed that One Piece is to blame for the delay. It was just logical guessing based on the fact that these insiders were still being told that Tooper was in production. Clearly, there was some kind of holdup behind the scenes, and a gigantic focus on One Piece over at Toei that hogged up all their resources just made the most sense. After all, One Piece is pretty much the only franchise on the totem pole over at Toei that comes close to generating the kind of money Dragon Ball does. So if Dragon Ball is going to be put aside in favor of any other franchise, at least it's Ichiro Oda's masterpiece. No other franchise would deserve that kind of preferential treatment, right? Perhaps one day we'll find out the real, behind-the-scenes story of summer 2019 in a tell-all interview or book, but as it happened, there was a fairly strong sense in the Dragon Ball community that Toei's focus on One Piece was to blame for the lack of new Dragon Ball content. Geekdom hinted at One Piece being a potential cause of Tooper's delay in his June video, and Yonko Productions also followed up with this on his Twitter, which only added more fuel to the fire. That was all we needed to hear. And just like that, 2019 was halfway over. We had no official word on a return for Dragon Ball Super, and all of the hype and momentum coming off that Broly movie was quickly evaporating. Luckily, June 2019 wasn't a completely miserable month for Dragon Ball fans. Despite no official update on Super's return, we did receive a new interview from Akio Ioku and Norihiro Hayashida. Ioku confirmed that the Dragon Ball Room was steadily making preparations for the next Dragon Ball movie, and even hinted at the direction that the overall story was heading. Broly was excessively powerful, so we think things will probably head in a completely different direction next time around. We raised the bar a lot with Broly, so we're trying to avoid becoming burnt out. I think Dragon Ball will continue from here on out, so we want you all to look forward to what's coming up next. Now, this interview was incredibly interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, it was sounding more and more likely that Toriyama's quote, next work that he hinted at Jump Festa 2019 was this very same movie that Ioku was teasing. Secondly, this interview was the very first tease of upcoming mainline Dragon Ball content from an official source in the year 2019. Nothing on a new anime or the return of Super, only this small tease for the next movie. That's right, damn near everything I've talked about in this video so far has been based on either fan speculation, logical assumptions, or insider leaks. To answer your question, yes, I am insane. Finally, while many assumed a new Dragon Ball movie was coming at some point, the fact that someone like Ioku was teasing it in an official capacity before any official mention of Tooper was definitely newsworthy. It flew in the face of what the fanbase had believed up to this point, and what the insiders were claiming. One had to wonder, is it possible that we'd be getting a new Dragon Ball movie before we got a new weekly anime? Given what we know about the movie, which is basically nothing, a new movie would surely be at least a year away. Meanwhile, others remain confident in the information provided from the insiders. This Ioku interview didn't directly contradict anything, and there was no reason why we couldn't get both a new movie and a new weekly anime at the same time. Again, One Piece is right there doing just that. As many had expected following the silence in late April and early May, July 7th came and went with nothing. Nevertheless, the year was now more than halfway over, and the lack of any kind of update regarding Tooper was a tough pill to swallow. The whole situation continued to not make any sense at all. The numbers spoke for themselves. Super sent the trajectory of the franchise in an exponential upward direction. Not having new animation ready for 2019 would be preposterous. Why would you want the momentum to be slowed after the greatness that was Super's finale and DBS Broly? As we covered, the only logical explanation was One Piece hogging so much of Toei's resources that Super's return simply had to be quietly postponed behind the scenes. It was probably an incredibly difficult choice, but one that ultimately needed to be made. I mean, there's no way any franchise other than One Piece could stand in the way of the almighty juggernaut that is Dragon Ball. It's difficult to put in words just how much hype was created by those insiders. So when July 7th came and went and Super was nowhere to be found, it was definitely a tough spot to get through. However, the eternally optimistic Dragon Ball fandom would not be broken. All eyes were now on an October air date for Tooper, and the next big event we could potentially get an announcement out of. October was feeling more and more like the right time for Super's return, if all the speculation regarding Toei's focus on One Piece was to be believed. One Piece Stampede would see a theatrical release in Japan in August, and come October, the Wano arc would have been well underway. One Piece's special time in the spotlight would surely be over by then. Not to mention the fact that Super's English dub would also finish airing over on Toonami in, you guessed it, October. October was the right time for Super's return. It had to be. The timing was perfect for so many different reasons. Or at least that's what the fan base liked to tell itself. At least that's what I like to tell myself. The Super dub ending meant a potentially quicker turnaround on the English version of the show. And of course, the audience of fans who refuse to watch the original Japanese version and only want the dub is gigantic and cannot be ignored. So what better place to announce this massive news, not just to Japan, but the world, than at San Diego Comic-Con, arguably the biggest pop culture extravaganza event in the entire world. If you had a big new TV show or movie to announce, you did that shit at Comic-Con. We were only 1 year removed from the DBS Broly blowout at San Diego Comic-Con in 2018, and that wonderful trailer set the internet on fire. It made all the sense in the world to announce Tooper's return at this event right here in July 2019. The timing would certainly be right if they had an October start in mind. This was it. This was the moment. The big announcement had to happen here at Comic-Con. San Diego Comic-Con 2019 came and went, and we got nothing. Absolutely no substantial news regarding the future of Dragon Ball at all. That one definitely hurt. July 2019 was supposed to be the big month. Super was supposed to come back. All the insiders said so. Instead, nothing. In the end, the biggest discussion topic of the month for the Dragon Ball fanbase was Sheeta's scene from episode 13 of Super Dragon Ball Heroes. I mean, damn, it went for 1 minute and 11 seconds, which was longer than anything he ever did for Super proper. Only Naotoshi Sheeta could come through like this for a glorified fan fiction cartoon that exists primarily to sell trading cards to Japanese children. One thing's for sure, he wasn't working on new episodes of Dragon Ball Super, at least episodes the world would get to see any time soon. But I digress. The fanbase was frustrated, and I'll be honest, I was frustrated too. Even if you didn't follow all these rumors and leaks and speculation, I think it was pretty safe to assume we'd see new Dragon Ball stuff in 2019 to follow up the Broly movie. Heading into August, with no official announcement made, it was becoming more and more likely that the fanbase would have to swallow the most bitter pill of all. We may not see Dragon Ball Super return in 2019. Yes, that reality was starting to sink in. Something we thought impossible. There was still hope for a surprise announcement coming at any time and an October start, but murmurs were already beginning that pointed instead towards an April 2020 start, for many of the same reasons as that initial April 2019 rumor. The Coors all lined up, we had no announcement at Comic-Con, and if we look back in on Kotaro, it would be hitting about 100 episodes come April 2020. Previous Kotaro anime ran for about 100 episodes as well, so the general feeling was that this new Kotaro anime would probably run for about the same length. This meant an April 2020 endpoint, and a perfect place for Tooper to assume Kitaro's slot. Come August, with some time to reflect on the entire situation, AJ wrote up an incredibly detailed post covering his side of the story over on the Kanzenshu forum. He went all the way back to the beginning of 2019 and broke down each and every scoop he had received that ultimately led to the July 2019 fiasco. Most of his story lined up with Geekdom's tell-all video that he released in June, but there were some new tidbits of information as well, and some great perspective on the situation as a whole. For example, why did we keep writing off Toei themselves every time they came out and denied the existence of Tooper. Obviously, by August 2019, it turns out they were kind of telling the truth this whole time. AJ explained that all of those denials from Toei, denials that the fanbase collectively ignored, came from Toei US. Toei US is an entirely separate entity from Toei Japan, so there was pretty much no reason to believe their denials were anything but damage control, the same way any other leak is handled in any other industry. AJ spoke to about a dozen staff members of Toei Philippines, who repeatedly confirmed the existence of a new Super series, an air date of July, and that it would be broadcast on Fuji TV. These same staff members also claimed their focus was always on One Piece Stampede, but work was ongoing for Super at various different stages depending on the staff member. Those with production materials specifically cited the Shintani designs from the Broly movie. Then July came, and of course, there was no Super to be found. AJ was able to follow up with a Toei staffer on July 31st in an attempt to clarify what exactly the situation was, and he received this message. I don't know when the new series will release, but maybe next year. As far as I know, there's no Dragon Ball this year. We're making some Dragon Ball Heroes episodes, but nothing with the regular DBS series. It was a truly bizarre situation. The question remained, why? What caused this seemingly rock-solid confirmation of a new Dragon Ball series starting in July 2019 to not pan out? AJ attempted to put all the puzzle pieces together in some kind of logical fashion in his post. Of course, he was well aware that many of the big names from Super's production team had moved on to work on One Piece Stampede. However, AJ himself was not convinced that One Piece was 100% to blame for Tooper's supposed delay. He was told by animators that the schedule on One Piece Stampede was very good, so the idea that Stampede was the sole reason why Tooper was delayed, it was possible, but not necessarily true. Not only has Toei been able to multitask a new anime and a new movie at the same time countless times, but Toei also has a long history of postponing projects, altering plans, or just canceling something outright. So perhaps that's the simple explanation behind this complicated story. Toei tends to just scrap or alter plans very early in the process. You'd think a franchise like Dragon Ball would be treated with a bit more respect than that, but this is the same company who, after 18 years, rushed the production of the new Dragon Ball anime and gave the world Episode 5. They've made stupid-ass decisions before, and maybe this was just another one of those. But ultimately, these were all just educated guesses. The reality was this: given how early in the process this information was getting out there was always a chance plans could change. And it looks like they did. The final consensus was that Super was planned to return in July, and that was set in stone. But then, for unknown reasons, the plan changed. Perhaps one day we'll learn the true story, what exactly happened and why, but for now, all we could do is speculate. With hope dashed for a Super return in 2019, we entered September praying for any kind of update regarding the future of our beloved franchise. And as it turns out, September wasn't completely uneventful. We received news on September 24th that the Kotaro anime would be entering its quote final chapter on October 6th. We had been speculating for a while that the series could come to an end in March 2020, and that meant something was gonna have to assume that time slot come April. But what? Dragon Ball fans waited with bated breath for that big announcement. Could Super return in April 2020? I mean, this had to be it. I know I've said this a million times already, but this really had to be it. What else could possibly assume that much coveted slot on Fuji TV? What could possibly be a higher priority over at Toei than Dragon Ball? October rolled around and radio silence. Super would air its final episode on Toonami in America. So now the dub-only viewers join the rest of us in the Tooper waiting room. Hello friends, welcome to hell. With October behind us, there was no other potential starting point for a new Dragon Ball anime here in 2019. The impossible had officially happened. We were about to go an entire year in this golden age of Dragon Ball, its all-time peak, with Toei and Bandai financials hitting record highs, without any new mainline Dragon Ball material. This was supposed to be the biggest year in Dragon Ball's history, and instead, we got nothing. We were gonna have to wait until 2020. But the 2019 story doesn't end there. A lot could happen in 2 months, and as we entered November, I think we all know where this is headed. 1 year later, we were once again on the road to another Jump Festa. We were now a year removed from where this whole story began. A year removed from when we were originally supposed to get that big Tooper announcement. Instead, looking back, not only did we get no announcement at Jump Festa in 2018, but we got nothing for the entire year that followed it. Surely, Jump Festa 2020 would at least somewhat make up for the crushing disappointment that was Jump Festa 2019. The powers that be could not stay silent. There was no excuse at this point that anyone could possibly throw around. Every single one had been exhausted throughout 2019. The international airings had finished, Piece Stampede was in the rearview mirror, and of course we were now over a year removed from DBS Broly's theatrical release instead of just days removed back in December of 2018. If the Tooper reveal wasn't going to happen here, for the love of God, that new movie that was teased by Toriyama and later Akio Ioku had to make its debut at Jump Festa. Give me Dragon Ball Super Cooler. I don't even care anymore. Just give me something new. The fan base was desperate at this point. There was no way we were about to go an entire year with nothing of note outside of a filler manga story, that lowest common denominator fan service trading card commercial, and one of the worst home releases for the show in its entire history, and I've definitely done enough talking about that shit. Was that it? Was that all we'd remember from 2019 for the Dragon Ball franchise? The opportunity was right there to make things right at Jump Festa. Hype really started to pick up in late November when Ryo Horikawa, Japanese voice actor for Vegeta, began tweeting out some hype posts for the Dragon Ball Super panel at Jump Festa. He outright tweeted, quote, "I just had a meeting with Toei, but I can't tell you what it's about." Oh, come on. Vegeta, you better not be screwing with me here. More smoke was added to the fire when the official Jump Festa 2020 Dragon Ball schedule was released, revealing a number of Dragon Ball related panels. It looked like there'd be a major focus on Dragon Ball here at the show. First was the introduction of new Dragon Ball products and big present stage panel, featuring our good friend Akio Ioku, the head of the Dragon Ball room. If there's a short list of people they would put on a stage to announce something like the return of Super or a new movie, in my mind, Ioku is on that list. Next up was a Dragon Ball Super anime special stage panel featuring the legendary Masako Nozawa, Takeshi Kusao, and Ryo Horikawa. What caught my eye looking at this list here is the fact that Heroes, Dokkan Battle, and Dragon Ball Z Kakarot all had their own unique panels. So these first two panels weren't going to focus on those other products. It was going to be something specifically Super related, and hopefully something new. Of course, the Dragon Ball community did what it does best. Go into a dizzying hype expecting the world. Tooper confirmed for Jump Festa. Or at least, Dragon Ball Super Cooler? We were definitely confused at this point. Would we hear about a new movie first, or the new weekly anime? To be honest, I was personally leaning more towards the movie being shown at Jump Festa, and it was feeling more and more likely that we get a movie first, and a TV series soon after that continued that story. Looking back at the overall timeline, Toriyama had begun work on DBS Broly in spring of 2017. The new movie was officially announced at Jump Festa in December 2017 and released a year later in December 2018. Given that he confirmed he was working on his next work at Jump Festa in December 2018, timing-wise it made sense that we'd see at least something new related to the movie in December 2019, if not a clip or key visual outright. This was it, kids. The time had arrived. We were finally gonna get that new movie or anime announcement and confirmation that it would be out sometime in 2020. 2019 would be forgotten in an instant. A dark year that could be put behind us. Jump Festa was gonna give us all the goods, with exciting Dragon Ball announcements that would set things right for the new decade. 2020 would be the big year for Dragon Ball that we were all waiting for. December 21st had arrived. Jump Festa 2020 was here, and fans waited with bated breath for the Megaton to end all Megatons. And then it came. One of the most beloved franchises in Japanese history was back. The classic 1980s series brought to life by the art of the one and only Akira Toriyama. It would debut in 2020, and it was a brand new anime. It was Dragon Quest Dai. It was Dragon Quest Dai no Daiboken. That was Toei's big announcement at Jump Festa. Dragon Quest Dai no Daiboken. Emphasis on Dai, because that's what I want to do. It was like a punch to the gut. You basically could not get much closer to a new Dragon Ball anime without actually making a new Dragon Ball anime. Dragon Quest Dai would begin its broadcast in fall 2020, and of course, much of the Dragon Ball Super team would be working on it, including Naotoshi Shida, who animated the teaser trailer, and Yuya Takahashi, who has been posting Dragon Quest art on his Twitter in recent weeks. Oh yeah, and all that teasing from Ryo Horikawa? Those Dragon Ball Super panels at Jump Festa? Nothing. No news of any significance came out of any of them. No update on the new movie, and much less any kind of word on the status of Dragon Ball Super. Amazingly, it doesn't end there. If the Dragon Quest anime being announced wasn't enough, Toei also announced at Jump Festa that they would be producing a new season of World Trigger. Although no broadcast date was provided for the new World Trigger episodes, most expect it to start sometime in 2020. With more and more shows like this being greenlit by Toei, it becomes more and more clear that somehow Dragon Ball is not the priority right now. Both Dragon Quest and World Trigger are being worked on by the same staff we all know and recognize from Dragon Ball Super. Now, obviously, I have nothing against other anime being greenlit and worked on by Toei Animation. However, given the circumstances, the announcements of these two shows at Jump Festa 2020 felt like a slap in the face to a Dragon Ball fandom that had been waiting basically an entire year for that big announcement to come, and it never did. While World Trigger was announced to just be a single season long, Dragon Quest, on the other hand, could very well cover the entire Dragon Quest Dai no Daiboken manga, and that thing ran for a whopping 349 chapters. That is a lot of material to adapt, and we could very well be looking at over 150 episodes for this Dragon Quest anime. The Dragon Ball fanbase was now looking at an absolute nightmare scenario. With all hands on deck over at Toei working on Dragon Quest, World Trigger, and all their other shows, forget 2019, a new Dragon Ball anime making its debut in 2020 had suddenly become a long shot. And on that depressing note, we have reached the present day and have exhaustively covered one of the most disappointing years I've ever experienced as a Dragon Ball fan. I honestly never expected to live through something like this after the series made its grand comeback with Battle of Gods in 2013. After such a hot streak, record high financials, and just so much excitement coming off 2018, we got nothing for an entire year. It is an absolutely insane story when you look at it all together like this, but it's true. All of it. I honestly can't remember ever getting my hopes up like this so many times in a single year for a single thing, only to be crushed by disappointment again and again and again and again. Hopefully, if you were wondering why Dragon Ball Super never came back in 2019, this video was able to shed some light on the situation. While I wasn't able to provide every answer to every question, I think we at least have a somewhat solid explanation at this point. But to wrap this video up, now that we know the entire story, let's do a quick recap and attempt to tie up some of those loose ends. First things first, what exactly happened during July of 2019, and what exactly happened to the supposed return of Super that had been confirmed by so many inside sources? The mythical July 2019 air date of Super is basically the heart of this entire video. Every rumor and leak that I covered from before March of 2019 were all building towards that July 2019 air date. Well, as far as I could tell, Super was going to make its return in July of 2019. The insiders were provided solid information from real sources within Toei. The Shintani designs were going to be used, and the production was smooth, beginning months in advance to avoid another Episode 5 situation. In the end, of course, that did not happen. And while I don't know exactly why it didn't happen, and we probably won't know the true behind-the-scenes story until we hear about it in some interview, I personally think One Piece is to blame here. I know nothing's confirmed, but that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. Damn you, Kaido. Damn you, Luffy. Dragon Ball deserves to look this good. Almost every single animator that we know and love from Super worked on that One Piece Stampede movie, and clearly that was Toei's focus for the entire year. After Stampede was completed, well, at this point, their choice really baffles me, but clearly, the priority within Toei was not to immediately begin work on the next Dragon Ball anime, but instead, Dragon Quest and World Trigger. We'll get into the logic behind this a little more with the next question, which is, how could Toei possibly go a full year without any new mainline Dragon Ball animated material, and does that make any financial sense? To me, the answer to this question is really simple. I don't know how they went through with this, and no, it doesn't make any sense on any level. This is some stupid shit, and I'm sure years down the line, they're gonna look back and regret wasting a year of Dragon Ball's prime on absolutely nothing. They're going to regret losing out on an entire year from our wonderful voice cast, especially our lead, Masako Nozawa, who just turned 83. Wasting a year at this point is baffling and doesn't make any sense. But I'm gonna try to make sense out of it anyhow. The first and most common argument I see that attempts to defend what Toei did here comes down to financials, which is hilarious, but I'll explain. So far, we've seen 2 financial releases from Toei and Bandai Namco for fiscal year 2020, which began on April 1st, 2019. Despite no ongoing anime or new movie release, the franchise as a whole is still doing incredibly well, and is still by far the biggest moneymaker for both Toei and Bandai Namco, despite there not being any new mainline animated material for Dragon Ball. So I've seen this argument come up pretty frequently, and people say something along the lines of, see, look, Dragon Ball still makes so much money. They don't even have to put out anything new because it's gonna make a bunch of money either way. They should focus on their smaller franchises. And while that is true to some extent, it's also extremely misguided logic. First things first, in 2019, the Dragon Ball franchise was still coasting off the success of Super and Broly. There were tons of action figures, video game DLC, and imagery that was easy to sell and still felt fresh and exciting. And of course, all of that came from the newest material. If you think Dragon Ball is capable of doing these kinds of numbers, if all they had to sell was yet another Super Saiyan Goku or Super Saiyan Vegeta, then you're crazy. It's the new stuff that is exciting. It's the new stuff that is still selling to people. Eventually, people will get sick of Ultra Instinct Goku and Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta in just the same way. The momentum will slow and those numbers will go down. Not capitalizing on that momentum with something new, while it seems okay in the short term, will hurt them in the long term. And if we don't get any new material in 2020 either, I really think the franchise is going to take a hit financially this year. Coasting off Super's momentum and turning your focus to other franchises like Dragon Quest and World Trigger is commendable in a way, like they're trying to prop up these other franchises and not be too dependent on just Dragon Ball. I get that. But it all comes at the wrong time for the reasons I've already explained. Dragon Ball should be the #1 priority right now, and capitalizing off the Super momentum is a timing thing that they're about to miss their window on. You could do a new Dragon Quest or season of World Trigger anytime, but make sure Dragon Ball, the franchise Toei specifically created an entire department to focus on, is covered properly first. They did not do that, and I can already feel some of the air coming out of the balloon here. There was so much hype coming out of the Tournament of Power and the Broly movie. Now all we have to talk about is Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and its stupid, non-canon drug epidemic that turned a bunch of humans into animal people. Wow. When it comes to successfully capitalizing on momentum, what always comes to mind for me is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is basically the most popular and well-run franchise in the entire world at this point. Before the first Avengers movie, we got Iron Man 2, Thor, and Captain America. All these movies did well at the box office, but it wasn't until the first Avengers movie, released in summer of 2012, that things got absolutely crazy. It grossed $1.5 billion, a ridiculous number for 2012 standards, and turned every character in that movie into a household name. So could Disney and Marvel and Kevin Feige have just took 2013 off and coasted on the success of the Avengers? Could they have just sold Avengers toys and video games and whatever other crap and just made a ton of money in the process? Yes, of course they could have. But what did they do instead? They did the smart thing. They capitalized on the momentum of the Avengers. In 2013, just 1 year after Avengers, we got Iron Man 3, which crushed the total box office take of Iron Man 2, thanks in large part to the momentum the first Avengers movie created. The world was hungry for more Marvel, so they gave us more Marvel. Soon after, Thor: The Dark World and Captain America: Winter Soldier came out, and they too crushed their predecessor at the box office. Since then, Marvel released 2 MCU films a year, and then 3 a year, all culminating in a little movie called Avengers Endgame, which only went on to become the highest grossing movie of all time. Now, I'm not saying Dragon Ball is going to be the next Endgame, but it's still a billion-dollar franchise. It's a franchise that had thousands of people gathered in a public place to watch its most exciting episodes on giant screens. Like, I can't get over that. That's just so crazy to me. It should be the #1 priority over at Toei until supply and demand suggests otherwise. We just celebrated its 35th anniversary, and you only do that for franchises that manage to stay around and stay relevant for 35 years. Dragon Ball is a massive deal, and letting your foot off the gas for a year like that is preposterous, in my opinion. It's a disservice to the fans, and yes, it's a disservice to your bottom line if you're Toei or Bandai Namco. So the whole situation makes no sense. That much is clear. But it also makes me wonder, what if this whole situation was out of Toei's control? What if the man we had to blame was Toriyama himself? Akio Ioku, the head of the very same Dragon Ball room that you'd think is just cranking out new Dragon Ball stories all day, every day, elaborated on how that process actually works in an interview after Dragon Ball Super Broly was announced. When asked about how the movie came together, he explained in 2016, Shueisha established a division called the Dragon Ball Room, which set the stage for thinking about future developments for Dragon Ball as a franchise. I'm grateful to my senior editors who helped craft the original Dragon Ball comic, which is the basis for the various developments up to now. It's truly precious to have it remain as a title after so many years, even from a global perspective. We can't very well have Dragon Ball, which has continued up to now thanks to my predecessors, end with Dragon Ball Super. Everyone involved on the staff was in agreement in wanting to continue the movies in order to keep the connection to Dragon Ball from here on out. But when the Dragon Ball Room was formed, here's what I thought. Up till now, it's spread because of the power of the work that is Dragon Ball itself. But in the future, we mustn't rely solely on that. We have to proactively appeal to new fans. That's how I felt. I also had another thought, which was that Dragon Ball is the work of Toriyama-sensei, so we need to continue having him involved up ahead. No matter how much we say we want to make a movie, if Toriyama-sensei says no, it ends there. This really got me thinking. If Toriyama isn't feeling particularly inspired, or is just taking his time to come up with a new story, unfortunately, it seems like there's not much that Toei could really do about that. Despite us being over 20 years removed from the end of Dragon Ball GT, it doesn't seem like Toei is comfortable going forward with a new mainline Dragon Ball story that doesn't come from the mind of Toriyama, at least in some way. The manga is fair game, a promotional non-canon anime like Heroes is fair game, but the main story itself needs Toriyama involvement, which means at the very least an outline that the Dragon Ball Room could then flesh out further. So while we don't know anything for sure, I don't think it's out of the question that Toriyama is still working right now on the next movie. Given everything we know about the man and his lack of planning, this likely means he hasn't put too much thought into any Dragon Ball stories beyond the next movie. And that could explain the lack of any kind of mainline Dragon Ball stories being released in 2019. If that's the case, come on Toriyama, you're killing us here. Pick up the pace, buddy. So with that, let's wrap this up with some final questions. Based on what we know, when could we expect to see Tooper or the new movie? And which will come first, a movie or a weekly anime? Well, it might not be what you want to hear, but I do believe at this point that the next mainline Dragon Ball material that will move the story forward is going to be a movie. And we won't get a sniff of that new anime until said movie is out in theaters. I'm hoping Toriyama is hard at work behind the scenes polishing up that story, and I do think we'll get our first look at the film sometime this year. Maybe that's optimistic, but I just can't possibly imagine they'd go 2 years without anything new being shown. But of course, I could be wrong. I mean, look at what we covered already in this video. Nonetheless, I'm optimistic. I'm going to say we at least get some promotional art or a key visual at some point this year, and probably a teaser trailer as well. Then, much like DBS Broly, we're probably looking at about a year turnaround from announcement to the release in theaters. So that means a 2020 announcement and a 2021 release. It's damn near impossible to pinpoint when exactly we'll get an announcement or what release date they'll go for. These guys are totally unpredictable with that stuff, but screw it, I'll make a bold prediction. I think we're going to get an announcement in either March, June, or September of 2020. Why these months, you ask? Well, they all come just before the start of a new cour. And yes, I'm going to say it now. I predict we'll see a new Dragon Ball movie released in either March, June, or September 2021 that leads directly into the start of the returning weekly Dragon Ball Super anime series in either April, July, or October 2021. A movie and an anime series releasing at about the same time would explain the whole delay. It would potentially explain why Toriyama is taking so long to complete this new story. And it would more than make up for this horrific wait we've had to endure. Wait a minute, speaking of course, oh my god, I almost forgot. Kitaro! Son of a bitch, Kitaro ends in April of 2020, and we don't know the replacement. Dragon Quest is confirmed to begin in the fall, and World Trigger is not broadcast on Fuji TV. What the hell is going to assume that slot? Is the Tooper dream still alive? Are we gonna get a February announcement and an April 2020 start for Dragon Ball Super? I mean, what else could possibly take that slot? There's no other franchise, certainly not another franchise from my childhood that starts with the letter D and is being rebooted and refreshed for a new generation, that could possibly take over for Kitaro. It has to be Dragon Ball Super. Oh, it's Digimon. As I was writing this video, we got the news that a remake of the original Digimon adventure would be assuming Kitaro's slot. Another show from Toei Animation. Another show that is going to take up resources. And it's assuming Kitaro's slot on Fuji TV. After all this time, after all the speculation, the spot we all thought was certainly going to be Dragon Balls is going to Digimon. I need to sit down. I'm out of energy, but I'll say this. The original Digimon adventure ran for 54 episodes. If this remake quickens the pace and lowers that episode count by a bit, then an April 2021 start for Tooper in that time slot is still potentially on. If they stretch it out a bit, we're probably looking at July or October of 2021. Oh my god, that is so far away. Say it ain't so, Toei. I can't wait that long. I can't do it. Here's hoping either Digimon gets moved out of that slot or Dragon Ball just airs in another time slot. I don't even know anymore. I don't know. God help us. With that, I'm going to wrap it up for today. That video went way longer than I expected, but the words just kept coming. What an unbelievable year 2019 was for Dragon Ball. As depressing as it all sounds, remember, it could always be worse. Honestly, this is nothing compared to the 2000s. I lived through the dark ages, the years after GT flopped, where we basically got nothing but video games for an entire decade. Dragon Ball felt legitimately dead, and it felt like it was never coming back. All we could do was watch our DVDs and enjoy that old show from the 90s that came to a definitive end. Then Toriyama saw Dragon Ball Evolution one day and realized, oh my god, I cannot let my baby be treated like this. Out of that, he gave us Battle of Gods, and the rest was history. So we'll be alright, kids. Now I'd love to say here, look forward to the next big news, which we should be hearing about soon. But come on. After this video, we know nothing is certain when it comes to this franchise anymore. That's the moral of today's video, kids. When it comes to Dragon Ball, there is no logic, and nothing makes sense. I bet Tooper will get announced in, like, September via a random tweet from the Toei Animation Twitter with no build-up in the middle of a day on a Tuesday. Either way, when that magical day finally comes and we get that big new announcement that the entire Dragon Ball fanbase has been waiting for, I'll definitely be covering it here on the channel. So if you like this video and want to see more Dragon Ball related content, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I have more ideas in mind for these kind of long-form Dragon Ball documentary style videos, so look forward to more sometime in the future. In the near term, we do have Ultra Instinct Goku confirmed for Dragon Ball FighterZ, so I'll definitely be taking a look at that once released, complete with a side-by-side comparison video. But that's all for today, so until next time, thanks so much for watching everyone, and take care.